ReeferGil here. In today's video, I'm going to go over my weekly, sometimes bi-weekly maintenance routine on my main display tank. As you can see, I've added the fish that were in the quarantine tank a couple of weeks ago. So far, everyone's doing excellent. Everyone is fat and happy. There's been no aggression in the last few weeks since they've been in the display tank. I did have concerns with the Malinaris wrasse and the orange-backed fairy wrasse. They started showing aggression towards each other in the final week inside the quarantine tank. But for the past few weeks inside the main display tank, I've seen no aggression between the two. I know I've covered my plumbing inside the main display to include the water changing system in a previous video, but since that video was made, I've picked up nearly 4,000 more subscribers, so I'll quickly go over it. This is a 100-gallon display consisting of a drain in the lower left corner of the tank. There are 3 fail-safes to prevent the water from accidentally draining out. One is this gate valve, which I wish I would have put a ball valve instead, but oh well. The second fail-safe is this ball valve on the right side of the tank going into the in-wall plumbing. And the third fail-safe is yet another ball valve above the utility sink in the garage where the water being drained out of the display will eventually drain into. At the start of this build, I had a friend run plumbing behind the wall of the main display and into the garage. There is a 1-inch PVC drain that runs inside the wall behind the tank, along the ceiling in the garage, and down the wall eventually into the utility sink where I can either allow the water to go into the drain or catch it with 5-gallon buckets to do water changes on the quarantine tank. To push freshly mixed salt water back into the display tank, there's a second 3/4-inch PVC running from the saltwater mixing bin across the ceiling in the garage, up through the wall behind the display tank, and is eventually plumbed directly into the main display. Inside the saltwater mixing bin is an Ecotech M1 pump. Yes, it is strong enough to push freshly mixed salt water from the saltwater bin in the garage, across the ceiling, up through the wall, and into the display. I configured the water changing system in this manner to easily change water without having to haul buckets up and down the stairs as I had with my previous system. I know not every home or apartment is structured to have such a water changing design, but I was fortunate enough to have a home that was built in the 1950s by an architect who had the forethought of building the home with the fish tank in mind. No, I just made that up, but it did work out that way. My real wish is to have a fully automated water changing system, a water changing system that could be done with the push of a button even if I wasn't home. But that dream will have to be placed on hold until there's a reliable way of creating such a system, but I think we're almost there. Anyhow, till then, I'm super duper happy with the almost fully automated water changing system. The first thing I do to change out the water in the main display is to clean off the glass and stir up the sand bed. I'll allow all the floating particles to be pushed down the overflow and into the filter socks below. After a while, I'll shut off all the pumps. I'll do this by selecting Feed Mode B on Apex Fusion, which is programmed to shut off all the pumps and the skimmer for 30 minutes. Once I've shut off all the pumps and the skimmer, I wait for the water to drain out of the main display and into the sump below. Then I open the gate valve directly behind the drain. I mentioned I wish I had put a ball valve here because it takes forever to turn this gate valve to the fully open position and then back to the closed position. Once I've worked out my forearm turning this gate valve to the fully open position, I walk over to the opposite side of the back side of the tank. Here I open the ball valve I had installed as a secondary failsafe. Obviously, I don't want to unintentionally drain water from the display tank, so fail-safes are super important when you have a drain drilled into your tank. A third fail-safe is yet another ball valve located above the utility sink in the garage. Once this third fail-safe is open, the water will drain from the display tank. Here I have the option of catching water from the display tank inside 5-gallon jugs of water for changing water in the quarantine tank. By filling up 5-gallon jugs, I know exactly how much water has drained out of the main display. On the other hand, if I choose to allow the water from the display to go down the drain and discard it, then I need to go back upstairs right away to monitor how much water is actually being drained. On the right side of the display tank, I have markers indicating how many gallons of water have drained out of the main display. Today I'll be draining 20 gallons of water. During this time, I make sure I pay close attention to the 20-gallon marker as the water is draining. This is not the time I want to be distracted by a phone call, text message, or any other maintenance job. I need to be focused on this tank. I can potentially drain all the water from the main display if I'm not paying attention. Right when the water level is at the 20-gallon marker, I reach over and close the ball valve behind the right side of the tank, ensuring it's closed all the way. After confirming the water in the saltwater mixing bin is at the right temperature and salinity, I go to Apex Fusion. In Apex Fusion, I turn on the Vector M1 pump in the saltwater mixing bin down below. I walk over to the back of the display tank and open yet another ball valve, this time to allow water to come into the display tank. It is so convenient to stay next to the display and do my water changes. No more buckets, how awesome is that? As the water from the saltwater bin makes its way into the display, I sit and watch the water level rise. As soon as the water level rises to the bottom of the overflow's teeth, I turn the ball valve controlling the Vector M1 pump to the closed position. Then I walk over to the tablet and turn the Vector M1 pump to off in Apex Fusion. Once I've done that, then I'll turn on the display tank's Core 20 pump and ensure that I have the proper amount of water volume. In addition to changing the water, I also remove the GFO and carbon reactor. The carbon dual reactor is hooked up to the plumbing's manifold. I take this into the garage and remove the media. After discarding the media into the trash and rinsing off the canisters, I took a quick look inside the outlet hose. I noticed that the hose had a buildup of brown gunk. I removed the outlet hose and soaked it in some distilled white vinegar. After a few hours, look at the amount of crud that came out of this hose. This stuff was definitely affecting the flow. I could have potentially caused a clog and forced a water leak. I need to be more vigilant about checking these hoses in the future. I'm betting the last time I cleaned this was 3 years ago. Now I'm using way more GFO than is recommended. I'm trying to keep some green hair algae at bay, and since I don't have any SPS corals yet, I'm not afraid to strip the water clean of any nutrients. Once the reactor is fully assembled, I hook it back up to the manifold and flush out the media into a bucket. I continue to flush the media until the water coming out of the outlet is clear. Then I remove the 2 filter socks and replace those with clean ones. I wait to do this once the water column in the display is clear of any floating debris. Lastly, I go downstairs into the water making station. I did do a video on how I built this water making station as well as how it all works. A link to that will be down below in the description. I have 2 brew containers stacked on top of one another. The top brew container contains RODI water. The RODI line runs from the RODI unit into the top container. It automatically refills itself and shuts itself off using this float valve. To pour water into the bottom container where I mix the salt, I open the ball valve and allow water to gravity drain into the bottom container from the top container. I use Aqua Vitra salinity salt mix and pour in the appropriate amount of salt into the bottom container. The bottom container has a heater and a couple of circulating pumps and of course the Vector M1 pump that we talked about earlier. I allow the salt to mix and for the water to heat up for at least 12 to 24 hours to ensure the water is crystal clear. Then I double check the salinity level inside the saltwater mixing bin and make any necessary adjustments to get the salinity at 1.026 specific gravity. Once this is done, I move on to the nano tank and quarantine tank. I'll do a separate video in the future showing you how I do weekly maintenance in those 2 systems. So that'll do it for this video. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscription button, hit that like button. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram for real-time updates, and we will see you guys next time.